Om Tavakatamratam Tapta Jivanam Kavibhareditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Shrimadatatam Bhuvigananti Bhurirajanaha. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome everyone to our class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We're in page 139 for those who like to follow along. This is the chapter, The Master and Keshab. It's October 27th, 1882. It was Friday, the day of Lakshmi Puja. The setting for this is that Keshab, who was the head of the Brahmo Samaj of India, or the New Dispensation, Navavidhan, that's the name that they gave it. This was shortly after the split that took place, where one half became what is now called, or what was called then, the Sadharan Brahmo Samaj, the general Brahmo Samaj, and Keshab's side was called the Brahmo Samaj of India, or the New Dispensation was the term that they gave for it. And what had happened that day was that Keshab came by steamer. He had married his daughter to the son of the Maharaja of Kuch Bihar, and this apparently was their steamer, so they got to use it. So he would have outings sometimes with the members of his Brahmo Samaj. So the split took place because of this marriage. He married his daughter, who was then a few months short of the marriageable age that the Brahmas themselves had set. Now, I mentioned last time I wasn't certain whether Vijay was just Vijay Krishna Goswami. He became the main acharya for the Sadhana Brahmo Samaj, the general Brahmo Samaj. I wasn't sure how much was because of him and how much was because of other people, but we were reading in the Great Master just last night that Vijay Krishna Goswami was very devoted to truthfulness. And he really was offended that Keshab himself had set the age of marriage. It was either 15 or 16, I don't remember, but that he himself hadn't kept to it. So Vijay Krishna Goswami himself was one of the ones who felt that he couldn't remain with the Brahmo Samaj under Keshab, and he left. It was a big blow to Keshab, and of course it was difficult for the Vijay Krishna Goswami also, because they were very, very close. Vijay Krishna Goswami was his right-hand man, probably, something like that. Now, on this day, Vijay Krishna came apparently with some of his followers from his half of the Brahmo Samaj, and were sitting in the room with Sri Ramakrishna, having a nice conversation with him. At the same time, Keshab Chandra showed up with a whole group of his people, and they came on shore, and went to Sri Ramakrishna's room and told him that they were waiting for him with the steamer, and they wanted him to come. They did it from time to time. We hear earlier that they did it with somebody named Cook, some Englishman, who was probably the first Englishman to meet Sri Ramakrishna in that type of setting. So they did it from time to time. Now, Bijoy and Keshab probably hadn't even spoken to each other. They not that they had any hatred or anything, but a very uncomfortable situation. But Bijoy Krishna Goswami wanted the company of Sri Ramakrishna and the others, and so they went with him. So this is the background. They all got on board at the same time, and later we'll see how Sri Ramakrishna will try to smooth things over, because again it was an uncomfortable situation. These are the two groups that split apart from each other. Actually, it was Bijoy Krishna's group that left Keshab's group. So this is the situation here, and Sri Ramakrishna is speaking to all of them. In the Gospel, it simply says, to the Brahmo devotees. So we're not making any distinction now. Some of them probably remained friendly, some of them probably didn't. We read last night that Narendra, he didn't care too much. He went to both. And even the ones who left Keshab, they all considered him to be a wonderful person and a highly spiritual soul. Only some of them felt that it was very hypocritical what he did. Thakur didn't. Thakur used to say, the duty of the father to arrange a good marriage. He arranged a good marriage for his daughter. It turns out that his daughter also became a well-known person. What was her name? Indra or something, I don't know. But she got involved or founded some girls' school or did some work. She made a bit of a name for herself. Of course, she had a lot of money, so a lot of opportunity to do things. It was a very good marriage. Okay, so that's the background. So Thakur is talking to them, and I'll start at the bottom of page 138. He said, to the Divine Mother, I prayed only for pure love. I offered flowers at her lotus feet and prayed to her. Mother, here is thy virtue, here is thy vice. Take them both and grant me only pure love for thee. Here is thy knowledge, here is thy ignorance. Take them both and grant me only pure love for thee. Here is thy purity, here is thy impurity. Take them both, Mother, and grant me only pure love for thee. Here is thy dharma, here is thy adharma. Take them both, Mother, and grant me only pure love for thee. Now this, Thakur used to talk about sudha bhakti. And sometimes we get the impression that sudha bhakti will be something different from what we call jnana misra bhakti. Devotion and knowledge combined. I don't think so. This is my own theory, that when Thakur talks about this pure devotion, I think he's really emphasizing the fact that it's selfless devotion, that there's no hint of any personal gain, not loving God for the sake of getting anything, just for the pure love of God. Because Thakur used to like this idea that there should be some deeper understanding behind our devotion, and if you want to love someone, you should know who you love. So he didn't like this idea of simply just be a devotee, don't think about anything, don't discriminate. He wanted people to do that also, but the Shuddha Bhakti, in the sense that there should be no selfish motive behind it. This is my feeling. I don't think it's in contradiction to this idea of Jnana Misra Bhakti. To the Brahmo devotees. Now listen to a song by Ram Prasad. Come, let us go for a walk, O mind, to Kali, the wish-fulfilling tree. How does it go? I am on Bharate Jabi, Kali Kalpatoru Mon. No, that's a different one. Okay. I am on Bharate Jabi, I am on Bharate Jabi, Kali Kalpatoru Mon. Something like that. I can't sing, but there's a tune which I did pretty good. This is called the Prasadi. The Prasadi. There's a tune. It's actually used for many other songs. Ram Prasad, he composed many songs to that tune, but then other authors would just write things and they could use the same tune. It became very famous. It's very beautiful. I wish I could sing. But so it says, come, let us go for a walk, O mind, to Kali, the wish-fulfilling tree. This Kalpatoru, it's famous for us because Thakur became this wish-fulfilling tree that we say on January 1st of 1886. This was a tree. If you could find this tree and sit underneath this tree, then whatever wish you had would be fulfilled. So if we approach Mother and with great sincerity, have some desire, she'll fulfill our wish. Come, let us go for a walk, O mind, to Kali, the wish-fulfilling tree, and there beneath it gather the four fruits of life. Kama, Artha, Dharma, Kama, Artha, Moksha. Of your two wives, dispassion and worldliness. This is Nivritti and Pravritti. They are called Jaya. These are the two wives, Nivritti and Pravritti. Bring along dispassion only. Nivritti is the tendency of the mind to turn deep within. Pravritti is the outgoing tendency of the mind, engagement, entanglement, attachment, all of those things. So of your two wives, dispassion and worldliness, bring along dispassion only on your way to the tree, and ask her son discrimination about the truth. When will you learn to lie, O mind, in the abode of blessedness, with cleanliness and defilement on either side of you? Only when you have found the way to keep these wives contentedly under a single roof. What does that mean? That means fulfilling our household duties, pravritti, being engaged in the world, whatever according to dharma, and at the same time withdrawing the mind, having inner renunciation. So pravritti has a role to play. The householder life is connected with pravritti. The sannyasa life is connected with nivritti, withdrawing.
Get attached.
Without getting attached. How do we do it? God knows. We cling to God. We hold on, and we have. If we have that higher ideal that we're doing everything just as an offering, then we won't get attached. If we have this idea that all I want is love of God, we won't get attached. If we have this idea, I'm really not the agent of action, I'm the witness, then we won't get attached. If we feel mother is the operator, I am the machine, we won't get attached. We have dozens and dozens of different methods of using that we can adopt so that we don't get attached. If we have longing, a real longing to lead a life of devotion, to lead a life of offering, then we won't get this type of attachment. And if we understand that attachment brings suffering, that'll also save us to a large extent. Only when you have found the way to keep these wives contentedly under a single roof will you behold the matchless form of Mother Shyama. Ego and ignorance, your parents, instantly banish from your sight, and should delusion seek to drag you to its hole, manfully cling to the pillar of patience. Tie to the post of unconcern the goats of vice and virtue, killing them with the sword of knowledge if they rebel. With the children of worldliness, your first wife, plead from a goodly distance, and if they will not listen, drown them in wisdom's sea. Says Ram Prasad, if you do as I say, you can submit a good account, O mind, to the king of death. Ram Prasad was an accountant. There'll be lots of references to that. I'll tell you in a second. And I shall be well pleased with you and call you my darling. The story is that his life was a little bit similar to Sri Ramakrishna's life. When he was young, his father passed away. He had to go to Calcutta to make money. Same thing. In Sri Ramakrishna's case, it was his elder brother who went and brought him along with him. He took a job in some business office and had to keep accounts. But instead of doing his work, he used to write the name Durga, Kali, things on the ledger, and sometimes he would start composing songs. And his co-workers, none of them liked him. Why? Because they all took bribes and did other things, and he wouldn't do any of that. So they resented him because of that, and they found out what he was doing. They saw his ledger and said, okay, now we'll get him in trouble. So they took it to their boss. The boss, it turned out, was a devotee of the Divine Mother. And as soon as he read the songs that were just in the margin of the ledger, tears came to his eyes, and he called in Ram Prasad. And he said, "You weren't born to do this clerical work. You go back to your village." He lived in a place, Hali Shohar, not too far from Calcutta. "You go back there, whatever salary I gave you here, I'll give you there. And you won't have to worry about money, and you compose your songs and worship the Divine Mother." So sometimes we'll see these references to keeping accounts. And then Thakur says, why shouldn't one be able to realize God in the world? This was the question. This is a long answer to that question. And it's asked over and over again. See, the Brahmos, they had no tradition, monastic tradition within their little circle. Of course, they were Hindu to a certain extent, so they understood the monastic tradition. They respected Sri Ramakrishna because he led the life of a monk, but all of their acharyas, teachers and leaders, were married people. Keshab himself was married. Bijoy himself was married. So they hear all of this talk of renunciation. They see that Thakur has some disciples. He wants them to lead the life of monks. And so they always had this doubt. Can one realize God in the world while living in the world? Before they met Sri Ramakrishna, the question probably didn't arise too much because Keshab didn't talk about those things. If you have devotion to God, you worship God, that'll be enough. But after coming to Sri Ramakrishna, this question comes up very, very often. So Thakur says, why shouldn't one be able to realize God in this world? King Janaka had such realization. King Janaka is always pointed to. He's the one shining example we have of somebody who had not just worldly duties, he had to run a kingdom. He was a king, Videha. He was a king. We've run across him not only in the Ramayana stories and everything, but also in the Upanishads. He was a great jnani also. These Yajnavalkis, others, these great pundits would come and they would have these high philosophical discussions, sometimes arguments with King Janaka. Sometimes he would be the one who would end up teaching them. So he was considered to be a great soul, both for the ideal karma yogi and also as a great jnani. King Janaka had such realization. Ram Prasad described the world as a mere framework of illusion. Now, Thakur is referring to a different song, and there's a story behind it. That in Hali Shohar, there was another devotee there who was a very strong Vaishnava. I don't remember his name, something Goswami. He was some Goswami. And he was a thorn in the side of Ram Prasad. Because whenever Ram Prasad would compose a song, he would compose a similar song, kind of making fun of it with an opposite idea. So he would follow him around sometimes, and Ram Prasad would sing a song, he would sing his own song. So, and as much as Thakur loves Ram Prasad, somehow he always liked we can say the answer, rebuttal song to this one song of Ram Prasad. Yeah. So whenever, even Thakur does it, whenever Thakur talks about that this world is a framework of illusion. That was this song that Ram Prasad wrote, and this other Goswami, he wrote the song, "This very world is a mansion of mirth." So Thakur somehow took sides with the other guy, and, even though he loved Ram Prasad so much. So he says, but if one loves God's hallowed feet, then, now he'll quote this other song by this Goswami, "This very world is a mansion of mirth." So in the beginning, everything is Maya. This world is full of suffering and misery that we want to get out, we want to escape. Thakur says, this is more of a beginner's attitude. He says, but if one loves God's hallowed feet, then this very world is a mansion of mirth. Here I can eat, here drink, and make merry. Janaka's might was unsurpassed. What did he lack of the world or the spirit? Holding to one as well as the other, he drank his milk from a brimming cup. Huh? So Thakur, he quotes this song very often. All laugh. But one cannot be a King Janaka all of a sudden. Janaka at first practiced much austerity in solitude. Yeah, it was very common for the Brahmos and others to say, our ideal is Janaka. We want to be like King Janaka. Now there's a little bit of a pun here, because Janaka means somebody who gives birth, is a father. Yeah. So Swamiji used to joke sometimes that these people of Calcutta, they think they can just be Janakas by having a lot of children. So what Thakur is saying is, yes, we read in Gita, we read, through karma alone, some attain perfection. And Janaka and others, Janakadaya, says Janaka and others. But Thakur always adds that, but you don't know how much of austerities King Janaka practiced before all of this. He said, with head down and feet up in the air, doing different types of austerities and things, and living in solitude and everything, preparing himself so that he could be an ideal karma yogi. Otherwise, this attachment can come. So he says, Janaka at first practiced much austerity and solitude. Even if one lives in the world, one must go into solitude now and then. This was one of the prescriptions that Ramakrishna made. The reasons are very simple and very complex. The very simple thing is that we have more time. We remove ourselves from the environment. We remove ourselves from all of the old associations. We can be very introspective. We can go very deep in our spiritual practice. This is the one thing. This is a very obvious, simple thing. The other thing, when we go into solitude, that we begin to realize ourselves, is that we invert things. We flip things upside down. That when we're in the presence of other people, we're seeing things as people see us. This is another theory that I have. This idea of identification with the body. It comes to a great extent because we see other people looking upon us as the body. That's the only way they can see us. So when we spend a lot of time in solitude, that disappears. That element is not there. And after a while, we start to experience ourselves from the inside out, not from the outside in. From the inside out, which is really what we are. I am the center of the universe. I am consciousness of everything around me, even of this body. That's my real nature. We start to feel that when we spend a lot of time in solitude. We get in the company of other people, and all of a sudden, I'm an embodied being. We live alone for a long time, we can almost forget that we have a body. We walk down the street, if we don't have any companions with us, people aren't bothering us, and we feel like our feet aren't touching the ground. We're simply observing everything, observing this body. We can really feel that we are what we really are. Swamiji says in meditation, this is the one time we can be who we really are. But this is because meditation is also solitude. So when we're in solitude, we can also have that type of feeling. So it's a very, very helpful thing. This second aspect of it only comes when we practice it. If we live for a long time in solitude, then we start to realize ourselves as the self, and cease to identify ourselves as the body, because there aren't other people to see us as a body. So a lot of it comes from that. We identify ourselves with the body. Not that other people don't recognize our personality and everything, but if they want to see us, what does it mean to see somebody? It means to see their body. We can't see anything else to see the body. So it will be a great help to a man if he goes away from his family, lives alone, and weeps for God, even for 3 days. So Thakur always emphasizes that even if it's a short time, because he knows people can't take time away from their work and their family and everything. Even if he thinks of God for 1 day in solitude, when he has the leisure, that too will be good. Sometimes he tells people, build a little hut or something. not far, if you have a little extra land, something, a little place where you can go and just remove yourselves from the family situation. People shed a whole jug of tears for wife and children. Remember, he's talking only to the men. That's why everything is wife and children. Remember, we're on the boat still. All the Brahmos are there. People shed a whole jug of tears for wife and children, but who cries for the Lord? Now and then one must go into solitude and practice spiritual discipline to realize God. So we can increase the intensity, increase the time, we eliminate all the distractions, a very, very positive thing. And we can learn to love solitude. We can learn to love solitude, enjoy our own company. This is Atmarama, not of course the highest type of Atmarama, but we enjoy our own company. Not the same as a God-realized soul who revels in the self, but still a little bit of touch of that we can experience. Living in the world and entangled in many of its duties, the aspirant during the first stage of spiritual life finds many obstacles in the path of concentration. While the trees on the footpath are young, they must be fenced around, otherwise they will be destroyed by cattle. The fence is necessary when the tree is young, but it can be taken away when the trunk is thick and strong. Then the tree won't be hurt even if an elephant is tied to it. Then Thakur gives a nice example. The disease of worldliness is like typhoid. And there is a huge jug of water and a jar of savory pickles in the typhoid patient's room. Typhoid is a disease that makes people feel thirsty all of the time. Huh? This is one of the things about it. I don't know too much about it. So the disease of worldliness is like typhoid, and there are a huge jug of water and a jar of savory pickles in the typhoid patient's room. So, if you want to cure him of his illness, you must remove him from that room. So as soon as he sees the pickle, the mouth will water, and as soon as he sees the water, he'll have the desire to drink. The worldly man is like a typhoid patient. The various objects of enjoyment are the huge jug of water, and the craving for their enjoyment is its thirst. The very thought of pickles makes the mouth water. You don't have to bring them near, and he is surrounded with them. The companionship of woman. Now, for women, he'll say the companionship of man is the pickles. Hence, treatment in solitude is necessary. Now, it's not only when he says man or woman here, any object of enjoyment. Now, the point is a very nice point here. I was thinking about this yesterday also. We read in chapter 2 of Gita, in the Stita Prajna section, about this causal chain, which starts with the mind dwelling on sense objects, and through that some attachment comes, some desire comes. If we don't fulfill it, some anger comes, and then we lose our sense of discrimination, and we completely become unhinged. Now, what Thakur is saying is that there's a step before this. That it's true, if we are always thinking about something, that the mind will get attached to that and some desire to enjoy it will come. What Thakur is saying is that we're fueling the mind by being in the presence of these things. So Thakur is telling us, physically remove yourselves. He says, okay, suppose someone has an addiction to alcohol. Now, it's not enough to simply say, well, don't think about it. Of course, if they're constantly thinking about taking a drink, that's one thing. But if they're constantly spending time in the tavern, then of course that desire will be even greater. So we're saying physically remove yourself, separate yourself from that object of enjoyment, so that the mind won't be constantly dwelling on it. The mind can still dwell on it, but this is the first, he's saying this is the first step. So it's a very sensible thing. This is why we wonder why he's talking about these young boys and always warning them. Don't keep the company of the women, even if they're great devotees, the women. Don't keep their company, because your minds will automatically become attached. This is the nature, because the unright mind is like the typhoid patient. In the company of possible attachments, that the mind will go in that direction. This is actually one of the tests. One of the tests for that sometimes they'll if they want to know if a young man is qualified to become a monk, they'll say if he's constantly in the presence of worldly things and the mind forms a little desire for that, it's understandable. If he's away from them, if he joins the monastery, and if he's not constantly bombarded with TV ads and billboards and things like that, or he sees women coming there all of the time, and the mind is still going in that direction, then it's not a good sign. Now what Thakur is saying is that you won't even know unless you remove yourself, go into solitude for some time. Of course he's talking to the householders now, but for the monks also. If we go into solitude and we find that the mind feels free, and then the mind can go deep within. He's saying that this is a very positive thing. Hence, treatment in solitude is necessary. So please don't get offended, all of our wonderful women devotees, that Thakur is he's not blaming the women. He said even if a woman is the purest soul, the greatest devotee, that is this unfortunate fact that lust is built into the constitution of human beings, maybe men more than women, I don't know. So it's not the fault of the women, and it's also not an excuse to keep them veiled and shuttered up. That's also not. That's also unfair. But this is the fact of it. So he's saying that this is why he would wonder how these places where men and women are sitting together for meditation, that half the time the eyes will be open and looking from both sides, back and forth. And even the Brahmo Samaj separated the men and the women. Oh. Yeah, because he would, when he was talking to the Keshab, once he gave in his lecture, he was saying, dive deep in the ocean, dive deep, and Thakur laughed and he said, you can dive deep, you have to keep coming back. What will happen to them? He says, pointing to the ones on the other side of the screen. That meant that the women were all sitting on the other side of the screen. So even they separated them. And when they came to visit, they didn't bring their wives. And when he went to Keshab's house he went many times to the homes of the Brahmos. And afterwards, he would go into the inner apartment where the women were and spend time with them and take his meal with them.
Brahmo women were a lot more educated.
They were more educated because they encouraged education. They discouraged child marriage. They encouraged remarriage of widows. So that's true. But they still observed a little bit of this separation that I think it came into India after the Mughal invasion, mostly. And not so much in South and everything. But it's true. They were very much in favor of education. There was a Brahmo girls' school, huh? Yeah. Yes, very highly educated. For Rabindranath Tagore, of course, it was actually his father who was the real founder of the Adi Brahmo Samaj, the original Brahmo Samaj. We can give some credit to Ram Mohan Roy also for really maybe being the original inspiration behind the whole movement, but Rabindranath Tagore, Towar's father was really the founder. So yes, they comparatively, they were much more liberal with regard to education of women and equal opportunity, but not 100%. They were also victims of the social conventions of the day and thought in those terms. One may enter the world after attaining discrimination and dispassion. Now, Thakur would scare everybody. Sometimes he would say, first realize God, then live in the world. And everyone says, well, how is that even possible? Even this is a little scary, that first attain discrimination and dispassion. That's a big thing. Before we even get married and have jobs and do all of those things. How do we do that? So he says, one may enter the world after attaining discrimination and dispassion. In the ocean of the world there are 6 alligators. Lust, anger, and so forth. So this is sometimes called Shad Ripu, the 6 enemies. Kama, Krodha, what is it? Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Mana, Vimatsara. There's a little verse. Kama, Krodha, Tatha, Lobha, Mada, Mana, Vimatsara. A little short little thing. There are a few different versions of it. Anyhow, and there are 8 nooses and things like. There are all different things, but we know these to be the different passions. That's all. Lust, anger, and so forth. But if you need not fear the alligators if you smear your body with turmeric before you go into the water. It has a pungent smell, and they don't like it. It keeps them away. I don't know if it really works. Don't try it. Discrimination and dispassion are the turmeric. Now, discrimination, of course, we don't use that word much anymore. It has such a negative connotation to it. But what is ultimately important in life? We don't have to go into all of this, this world is unreal and God alone is all of that. What is ultimately important in life? What is this life meant for? What do we want to accomplish in life? This type of discrimination is very important. And dispassion, that let us not get carried away with all of our attachments to this world, and really attachment just steals away the ability of the mind to discriminate, to make good decisions, to know what to do, what not to do. So these 2, Vivek Vairagya, or the turmeric. Discrimination is the knowledge of what is real and what is unreal. It is the realization that God alone is the real and eternal substance, and that all else is unreal, transitory and impermanent. This is enough for us. We don't have to think, is it a dream? Is it a projection? We don't have to go there. We know that this world is transitory, that it's impermanent, there's nothing to hold on to, it's insubstantial. And you must cultivate intense zeal for God. This is another one of the Thakur's formulas, that this vairagya is always accompanied by anuraga. It doesn't do any good to eliminate our attachment to the world if we don't replace it with attachment to God or to truth. The longing for enjoyment has to be replaced with a longing for realization. So there's anuraga. Thakur always adds that. And you must cultivate intense zeal for God. Anuraga, Vyakuluta. You must feel love for Him and be attracted to Him. The gopis of Vrindavan felt the attraction of Krishna. Let me sing you a song. Now, he's singing the exact wrong song for the Brahmos. They don't care for any of this Krishna, Leela, stuff like that. They were modern people. They based everything on the Upanishads. Upanishads. That means none of this wishy-washy mythological love stories or anything like that. They loved the Upanishads and the path of knowledge. Thakur always called them bhaktas. Yeah. I like you because you're devotees, you're not jnanis. But they thought of themselves more as Gyanis. Yeah. Gyanis, but they still had some type of love, but not this intense personal type of love of God. Listen, the flute has sounded in yonder wood. There I must fly, for Krishna waits on the path. Narendra also hated these things in the beginning. But he sang these songs. He didn't really hate it. He would pretend that he hated it. But he actually sang a lot of these Radha Krishna songs. Tell me, friends, will you come along or no? To you, my Krishna is merely an empty name. To me, he is the anguish of my heart. You hear his flute notes only with your ears. But oh, I hear them in my deepest soul. I hear his flute calling, Radha, come out. Without you, the grove is shorn of its loveliness. The master sang the song with tears in his eyes and said to Keshab and the other Brahmo devotees. Now, he's going to say something that I think is very, very important. I think that this is extremely helpful. Whether you accept Radha and Krishna or not. Now, what does that mean? On the one hand, it can mean whether you believe that they ever existed. It may be sheer poetry. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, whether you even like the idea. Even if it's real, you may say, what is this? This is some young girl who falls in love with some young boy. So whether it's real or not real, you may not even like it. And you may not think that, you may think it's just poetry, sheer poetry. He says, please do accept their attraction for each other. Try to create the same yearning in your heart for God. Yearning is all you need in order to realize Him. Now, the point here is that this Radha Krishna episode, and we don't have to accept it as historical. It makes no difference whatsoever. We can say that it's sheer poetry, just for the sake of argument. Let's say that it's sheer poetry. If we can understand the pain and anguish that Radha felt when she was separated from Krishna, and that intense joy she felt when she was in the company of Krishna, that's enough. This is what Thakur is saying. It's enough. Try to understand what they're trying to teach us through this story. Huh? It doesn't matter whether you accept it as real or not real, and adopt it to whatever way you want to. If you're Brahmos and you think about God as Brahman, okay, the supreme absolute Brahman, at least feel that this life is empty unless I have that realization, and that with every ounce of my being, I want to have union with that Brahman. I want to realize God. Accept that attitude. This is what he's saying. This is the attitude is everything. Jamon bhav temni labh. As is our attitude, it says feeling of love here usually, but as is our attitude, so is our gain. So this is the beauty of this relationship. We can forget about this idea of love between a young boy and a young girl and all of that type of stuff. That's not the important thing. The important thing is that this world is empty without this realization, this tremendous longing, and the tremendous joy that we have when we experience union with God in whatever way we understand it. So this is the real meaning behind what's called viraha bhava and milana bhava. Viraha bhava, that yes, we should feel miserable, that there's an emptiness, that we feel that we're separated from our real being. What is that real essence of our being? It may be personal, may be impersonal. It may be the truth, that I'm wallowing in ignorance. I know that I don't know the purpose of life. I don't know who I am, even that. And because of that, I'm miserable. There's tremendous longing to have that experience. And then we have it, the tremendous joy that comes. So this is what Thakur is saying, that forget about the personalities, forget about the story. Try to understand the tremendous longing that a young girl will have when she has a crush on a young boy. This is really what's happening. How old are they? 12, 13, something like that. They would force these young girls to get married to some older man. They're miserable at home. And the young boy is there who plays the flute, who's charming. They all get together and sing and dance. And every moment they're longing to go back and have this Raslila. Huh?
It's not for everybody.
It's not for everybody. It's not for everybody, but this longing is for everybody. This is what Thakur is saying. He's saying that this feeling of bakulata, this intense yearning to have that union, and it's definitely not for everybody. And he knows it's not for the Brahmos. He knows it's not for them to think in terms to try to, really, do I want to try to identify myself with a 12-year-old girl who's anxious to go and play with some boy who's playing his flute with cows around and everything? It doesn't appeal to my mind very much, but I understand. I have to try to think, what is the frame of mind of Radha? Does she have anything selfish in her mind? She only cares to make Krishna happy. There's so many beautiful things in this Radha Krishna Leela. Huh? And we have to understand and draw that. Don't simply dismiss it and say, no, it's not for me. I don't like all of this stuff. Swamiji himself didn't care for this. Even though he would sing these songs and everything, he would say, we're monks. Why do we have to have a relationship and think about that? But he understood. He understood the beauty of it. And this is what Thakur is saying. It's, we can learn a lesson from all of these different bhavas. Somebody may say, you want me to identify with Hanuman? He was a monkey. And that I should just do blindly, think about only what the master wants, as being like a servant. But we have to understand the nature of the mind of Hanuman, how pure it was, no selfish motive whatsoever. Each of the bhavas has a special element to it. This selflessness, this boldness, this fearlessness, this pride. I am a servant of God. Each one has something special. In this Radha Krishna Leela, the speciality is this intense longing for union with God. That we can all adopt in our own way. And so, because he adds this because he knows that they don't accept it. He says whether you accept Radha and Krishna or not, he's saying that that's not important. I know that you're not going to wake up tomorrow and you'll turn into the Vaishnavas and you'll sing and dance with songs of Radha and Krishna. I know it won't happen. But for that reason, don't dismiss it. Understand that this is one of the best examples we have of bakulata, the tremendous longing, anguish of heart at separation, longing for union, and the joy of realization. Try to create that same yearning in your heart for God. So this viraha bhava in the case of Radha was so intense that the body would be burning. Sri Ramakrishna went through that. He went through it to such an extent, this is hard to believe, such an extent that sometimes full days he had to spend immersed in the Ganga. And the Bhairavi Brahmani, in order to help him move, would have to have a cloth to cover his body, because if she put her hand on his body, her hand would burn. And sometimes they would take mud and rub it on his body in order to cool the body off. Immediately that mud would turn into hard dirt, cracks, like you see sometimes in very dry areas where there's drought, how the ground will crack. This was no joke. This isn't an allegorical thing of this burning of the body. He experienced these things. These were the different signs of Mahabhava that Radha had also, and Chaitanya Deva had, and Sri Ramakrishna had. And Bhairavi Brahmani, she saw these, and she told all of these things to all the pundits, and they said, yes, these are all the signs that these rare souls who had this Mahabhava. There's Radha and Chaitanya Deva and Thakur. Yearning is all you need in order to realize him. So with King Janaka, karma yoga wasn't enough. He had to do intense austerities in the beginning, Thakur says. But we get this bakulata through doing intense spiritual practice, when we realize that nothing is enough, that there's a limit to how much we can do. Then it leads to this both surrender and yearning at the same time. Both at the same time. There's one time at least, probably other times, when Somebody asked Thakur, what is the purpose of sadhana? Why do we do spiritual practice? And he said, it increases vakulata. It increases this yearning for God. It doesn't directly bring about God realization. It does many things. It purifies us. It sharpens our understanding. It does many, many things, but it increases our vakulata. That was what he felt was the causal link. If we want to say what's the real cause of God realization, he would say the vakulata. Everything else is preliminary. Everything else leads up to that. For the devotees, they'll say everything leads to bhakti, and that's the real link. For the jnanis, everything leads to a purification of the heart so that the mind can be clear, and everything leads to jnana, and that's the real link. For Thakur, the real link was vakulata. It doesn't contradict the others exactly, but he gave special emphasis to that. Gradually the ebb tide set in. The steamboat was speeding toward Calcutta. It passed under the Howrah Bridge and came within sight of the botanical gardens. So they had picked him up at Dakshineshwar and they're going south. They'll go south a certain distance, and then Keshab will tell them to turn around, and they'll go back, they'll drop him off, and then they'll go back, and wherever they keep it moored, that's where they'll take it. The captain was asked to go a little farther down the river. They didn't want it to end. They didn't want him to turn around and go back. They were enjoying Thakur's company so much. The passengers were enchanted with the master's words, and most of them had no idea of time or how far they had come. Keshab began to serve some puffed rice and grated coconut. I read a fascinating thing this morning. There are books that have come out that have so many interesting things that I never knew about. That when Thakur was young, he used to ask his mother for his puffed rice, muri. And he would take this puffed rice. There's a certain type of big hat. What do they call it? Toka or something? Do you know the name of that? Some big kind of country hat that they would wear. And she would put it in that. And he would go around, and whoever he saw, he would give them some puffed rice. And he would take some himself, and he would go back and tell his mother to fill it up again. And he used to tell the women of the village. He was very, very close with, in Kamarpukur, he was very often the only male, even though he was a boy, who could hang out with the women so often. Especially this Laha family. They loved him very much. He would sneak in sometimes. There's a nice story how the father of the family, he said that no man has ever been in the inner apartments where the women are. He was very strict about that. So Thakur one day dressed up like a girl, and he went in, and they all greeted him as if he was some stranger, took him inside and everything, and then at the end, laughing, he showed who he really was, and they had fun with it. But so he would tell them that they should go around, they should put it in the corner of their cloth, keep them puffed rice with a little holud, with a little turmeric mixed in. And they should snack on that during the day. So he loved this puffed rice. We know the story that when he was going to the Vishalakti temple and had that vision of the cranes and everything, that he had the same thing. He had his puffed rice, and when he fell down unconscious, the rice went everywhere. The murti. I don't know. Turmeric is a holud. Holud, yeah. Yeah, I never heard of that exactly, but. So Keshab began to serve some puffed rice and grated coconut. You know there's Bengali people, they loved puffed rice. Yes. And even our Swami Swahanandaji and our Swami Sarvadevanandaji also. Yes. Yeah. It's such a common thing. Other people think, what is it? It's nothing very special. But, and they make wonderful things with it. They'll put the little cucumber in and some different spices and things and peanuts and also they'll come on the train with their little strapped around them, their little thing, and they'll have this and this and this and this and a little mustard oil and all sorts of things. A fantastic snack. Some peas and some dhania, pata, coriander, other things. So Keshab began to serve some puffed rice and grated coconut. The guest held these in the folds of their wearing cloths. So just as Thakur was saying, and presently started to eat. Everyone was joyful. Now we'll get this situation. The master noticed, however, that Keshab and Bijoy rather shrank from each other. Yeah, it was uncomfortable for them. They didn't want to look each other in the eye. They probably hadn't spoken since the split took place. And he was anxious to reconcile them. Thakur was anxious to reconcile them. Master to Keshab, look here. There is Bijoy. Your quarrel seems like the fight between Shiva and Rama. Shiva was Rama's guru. Though they fought with each other, yet they soon came to terms. But the grimaces of the ghosts, the followers of Shiva, and the gibberish of the monkeys, the followers of Rama, would not come to an end. Loud laughter. Such quarrels take place even among one's own kith and kin. Didn't Rama fight with his own sons, Lava and Kusha? Again, you must have noticed how a mother and daughter living together and having the same spiritual end in view observe their religious fast separately on Tuesdays, each on her own account, as if the welfare of the mother were different from the welfare of the daughter. Now, we're coming to the end. I remember reading this and thinking, what in the world are they talking about? How do you observe fast separately? Fast is a fast. The fast means you don't eat anything. And then I learned in Bengal they have wonderful ways of fasting. You can eat all sorts of things.
Yes,
huh?
that's true.
You can have luchi, you can have fruits and this and that. So on a fasting day, the mother and the daughter-in-law, they can easily help each other. I'll make some luchi and you can do that and we can do it together. So then it makes a little sense. Otherwise I'm thinking, what are they talking about? You're fasting alone. How do you fast alone together? Didn't make any sense. So anyhow, he's talking about people who really are on the same spiritual path, Keshab and Bijoy, and yet they had this misunderstanding or disagreement among them. But what benefits the one benefits the other. In like manner, you have a religious society, and Bijoy thinks he must have one too. Laughter. But I think all these are necessary. See how nice he's being. While Sri Krishna, himself God incarnate, played with the gopis at Vrindavan, troublemakers like Jyotila and Kutila appeared on the scene. You may ask why. The answer is that the play does not develop without troublemakers. Olaf. There's no fun without Jyotila and Kutila. Ramanuja upheld the doctrine of qualified non-dualism, but his guru was a pure non-dualist. They disagreed with each other and refuted each other's arguments. That always happens. Still, to the teacher, the disciple is his own. Bijoy wasn't exactly a disciple of Keshab, but Keshab was really the senior one among them. All rejoiced, and the master accompanied, and his words. We read that after this, Bijoy and Keshab, they reconciled to a certain extent.
Did they eventually got it?
No. What happened was that, so they at least got on speaking terms again. But shortly after this, Bijoy also left the Sadhana Brahmo Samaj because he really was never cut out for that. Thakur said over and over again that if we try to follow a path that's not suited to our personality, it won't work. And he said, this is Bijoy Krishna Goswami. He was a Goswami. The Goswami, that means, in Thakur's mind at least, that means that they were born with this samskara of bhakti, of devotion. That they trace their lineage all the way back to one of Chaitanya Deva's disciples, to one of the Goswamis or the Vishnu Priya, something like that. So he always said that Bijoy had the nature of a devotee. So through the company of Sri Ramakrishna, Bijoy also developed this tremendous feeling of renunciation. So I mentioned before his honesty, and so we were reading the Great Master, there's a long section about this, that because of his honesty, he felt that he could no longer remain in the Brahmo Samaj because the tendency of his mind was towards worship of God with form. So he left, and then only Shivnath Shastri was there, And it started to dissipate, the second one. It really fell apart a little bit. And Vijay Krishna Goswami, he renounced the world during Thakur's lifetime, because we see in the gospel that he would come and Thakur would say, "Oh, Hal Bijoy, now wearing Garua." So much renunciation, he even dyed his canvas shoes Garua color. He mentioned something like that. So that's what happened. I think probably this other Brahmo Samaj died out a little bit, even Keshab's group, because Keshab, so within a couple of years, Vijay Krishna Goswami, he leaves and renounces the world, and Keshab dies. He died in 1884, I believe. Gradually it kind of disappeared. I guess it kind of morphed into this Shantiniketan with Rabindranath Tagore and lasted more that way. Calcutta is not too much. From Ram Mohan Roy. He was the original inspiration, and I think Devendranath Tagore was the one who really founded the Adi Brahmo Samaj, what we call the Adi Brahmo Samaj. Okay, so we'll stop here. This is page 141, and I will close the chant. Om Niranjanam Nityamanandarupam Bhaktanukham Bhathur Vikraham Vai Ishavataram Parameshamhedyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namamaha. Om, we bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Everyone, thank you for joining, and everyone please stay well, and we will see you next time.